I would say the word Israel. I called the region Israel, hesitated, Israel-Palestine. It's just like what I'm used to calling it. I've never been in a room where people heard what you said, looked at each other, laughed, and snickered. Ha ha ha, I'm a Zionist and I support genocide. They beat up all of us, repeating something that we had said, a word or a phrase, and kind of unraveling why I was inherently supporting genocide to say this one word or phrase. That was one of the most high pressure moments I've ever felt like I was in, and I learned a lot from the pressure of having to think about every single word that I was using. And that's exhausting. I remember shaking and stuttering a little on my words. Javi, do not fuck this up. But you kind of have to mess up to learn. And that's just the ugly truth about something this complicated and with stakes as high as the ones that we're entering into.
There's no question that the human mind is pulled towards the negative. People are both afraid and angry and don't know what to do with that fear and anger. We need people to learn to engage in enough self-care to steer their own emotions in a way that allows us to see the big picture.
Our tribal sensibilities are what allowed us really to flourish as a species. We were able to find those individuals with whom we could work together. But we've now entered into this era where it's too easy to find individuals that we can identify with over things that are very narrow. And as a result, we can become less willing and able to cooperate with those who are right next door. So how can we draw the circle larger so it's more inclusive?
Positive emotions change the way the human brain takes in information. It gets us out of this corner where we're kind of trapped in a small view of the world and can lead to a more expansive view. That's how we feel like we're part of something larger.
I think there's a lot of talk about where our country is being torn apart. There are people on both sides contributing. Intellectual humility and curiosity and open-heartedness are not the name of the game. My name's Simon Greer. I've developed a practice called Courageous Conversations. It's a disciplined approach to how we engage with people productively, even when we have fundamental disagreements.
I think there are times that we screw up, but we can have a civil and respectful discussion.
Thank you for being real.
We decided to adapt the Courageous Conversation approach to higher education. What do we know about how you communicate across difference that could equip students, our nation's future leaders, in doing something that desperately needs to be done and far too few people are doing?
I used to love teaching, but then suddenly I started getting reported to the dean. And so because of that, I just don't say anything offensive. I'm not provocative. I just play things by the book. I don't tell jokes. I keep things very dry because I can't trust my students.
It is really sad
Yeah.
that you just said, I can't trust my students.
Right.
What does it mean for our country that someone as thoughtful as you feels like I can't put my best teaching self forward?
There's a culture of there's just certain things you don't say, and if you deviate from that, you will get called out on it.
People don't want to communicate across lines of difference. They want to hunker down with their friends where they feel safe and secure and validated. Shame on us for not equipping them to do something different. This past September, you gave us a challenge when you were at TNP.
We know that lots of other people are wrong most of the time. Well, probably we're wrong some of the time. you need people who disagree with you because only they can challenge your confirmation bias.
You told us how bad things were on college campuses, and we took you up on that challenge, and we went to campus to actually see how bad it is. What we found going to Oberlin and Spring Arbor, so Oberlin, super liberal school, yep. Spring Arbor is Free Methodist, evangelical school. Every campus is not burning, but there are issues. Mm-hmm. So this thing they told me about called a call-out culture mm-hmm. or a cancel culture was really, it was prevalent on the campus. And I want to talk to you about that. I'm excited to get your reactions.
My favorite thing to talk about.
But before I do, can you remind us all again, how would you describe the state of play on college campuses?
So what has happened since around 2015 is not that students have lost their minds or students are suddenly, snowflakes or something like that. We have the arrival of Gen Z on campus beginning around 2014, and they do bring different norms. But what has really changed is not the average student, it's the dynamics in the community, so that now anyone who takes offense on a small number of issues can call someone else out, call them racist, sexist, homophobic, transphobic, Islamophobic. People who hold the minority view are often afraid to give their honest opinion. The phrase that you hear from a lot of students is walking on eggshells.
As a college first year, all you want to do is fit in and make friends. I'm just as guilty of conforming. My mom is a Mexican immigrant from Guadalajara, Mexico. My dad is a Cleveland Ashkenazi Jew, tall, bald, white guy. I remember always getting questioned in elementary school, oh, I didn't know a Jew could be Mexican, or I didn't know a Mexican could be a Jew. My parents raised me to say, I'm unique, be proud of my identity, and the theme of my bat mitzvah speech was about being proud of who you are. Instagram, specifically at Oberlin, is a platform where people put a lot of information out about what you need to know and how you need to think. To be a good person, I have to be pro-choice. I have to support gay rights. I have to support immigration reform, all three of things that I'm no problem agreeing with, obviously. But then it's also you have to hate Israel. I was told I'd been brainwashed since I was a child, and I said, oh my gosh, maybe I have been.
That's what call-out culture is very much about, is policing the boundaries of acceptable speech and thought. And that is a very bad environment for anyone, but especially for young people who are trying to explore new ideas.
Oberlin College and Spring Arbor University did the first ever Bridging the Gap program, where students from the two campuses came together to learn courageous conversation skills. And the skills, they sound basic. They're listening, providing feedback, and telling stories. But it turns out you don't learn them anywhere.
We focused on how to have hard conversations.
They talked about gay marriage, and they talked about abortion, and they talked about climate change. I mean, they talked about all of it.
I had a hesitancy to share my faith because I wasn't sure if they would allow room for me to express my faith.
There were some disagreements.
He used the word colored, and it just, for me, I was like a recoil.
Sometimes views are hurtful to other people, and they're not right.
They were saying whoever joins the military are murderers. That got me heated.
Often we're listening, but now something bothers us, something upsets us, we disagree about something, and we have to try to communicate it.
Simon told us to sit down and think and not jump to conclusions and ask why.
We teach a basic set of tools, and then we drill them in practice. It's not just understanding intellectually, but you actually need to try doing it.
Simon's toolkit for courageous conversations includes a lot of active listening and a lot of open-ended questions. and especially a lot of open-mindedness on the part of the person who is offended. I had to sit back and think, okay, you can either say nothing, you can approach it like a courageous conversation, or you can get angry. I knew that I didn't want to not say anything, but I also knew that I didn't want to get angry because that's not productive, and especially with someone that I just met, I didn't want to alienate them so quickly. And so that leaves the third option, which is having a courageous conversation.
What I saw in the students on campus is they want something different. Like the summary flattening of evangelicals and the flattening of snowflakes, it doesn't actually describe the kids I met. Right? They've had complicated lives, they've been through a lot, they're complex people, and they actually want to make a difference in the world.
There's a lot of people at Oberlin who think that engaging with evangelical conservative ideas is bad discourse.
Christian values have played a huge part in my upbringing. We were homeless for about an entire year. I kind of took care of my brothers and sisters. Statistically speaking, I'm not supposed to be where I am. I'm supposed to be a single mom. I'm supposed to be living in a impoverished neighborhood and possibly on drugs.
Please just bless this time that we're together. Thank you for the larger group, more people we get to know and more people get to learn.
We went to this meeting called Vertical, which is like a Bible study. It became very clear that most of them thought of homosexuality as a sin, which is just something that morally makes me really, really uncomfortable.
We started talking about these foundational beliefs and things like sin and salvation.
I didn't want to be confrontational because I felt that that would just entrench us and we wouldn't get anywhere. So the question I asked is sort of how do you determine what is a sin? So much of it emphasizes the faith, and I don't have that faith. Yeah. There's a bit of hypocrisy there, and the Spring Arbor students were actually the ones that brought this up, which was really interesting. They acknowledged that they're so focused on that specific sin, on homosexuality, but other sins get essentially no focus from the church.
Trying to get rid of the tension, it prevents people from seeing someone else's perspective. Skills I used, I definitely just sat there and I listened. And I tried to clarify some of the questions that the Oberlin students had before I started to answer.
Where does your faith come from? What has made you have faith in God in a way that I don't? And we actually had I thought that discussion was really, really productive and really, really interesting, and I learned a lot.
The biggest call to being a Christian, I'd say, is having a relationship with God and having a relationship with others. And that requires honesty and trust and more than anything, transparency. And I think in the Christian culture, we lose that transparency because we're afraid of how we're going to be perceived. With these progressive liberals, they allowed me to go deeper with them. I'm actually really comfortable with them, even more comfortable than I am with most Christians. Baby rocket, little Einsteins, climb aboard, get ready to explore. So Javi is Latino female who identifies as bisexual. And so I never imagined myself as someone who befriends with someone who was a bisexual Jewish woman.
Telling you that I was bi, I was worried you wouldn't want to have our sleepovers anymore, and you wouldn't want to, you'd see me different.
I do consider myself more conservative and traditional in my Christianity, right? And so, I am a straight black female. And then Javi is a bit more liberal. We've literally supported each other in our most insecure moments.
I'm so grateful to you for getting me through, like you said, our highest and lowest points.
For you to be bi and then also really intense in your faith was so fascinating to me, because faith and bisexuality for me are they don't coexist. And I'm like, in all honesty, like, I still don't know. Like, it's not that I don't know. It's literally like, I'm trying to grapple with like the right and wrong.
Yeah.
And so it feels wrong. But you don't feel wrong.
Thanks.
We have a lot of differences. But yet and still, like, I don't feel those differences in my relationship with her. They don't feel like they're present, but I know they're there, but they don't feel present in how I interact with her.
It hasn't changed our friendship. And I don't know, you still love me, so thank you.
We have students who have said, this changed my life, it transformed my life. Well, that's not just because they learn like the building blocks of listening. Right? Something deeper happened. What I've offered the students is 100% commitment to them if they want to go on that journey. And I think that's probably grounded in like some deep thing I would call love.
Listening is a form of love. Just letting somebody tell their story.
I want you to feel like someone cares enough about you that they don't want you to live in this tiny little circle you've defined for yourself that will ultimately limit your impact, your potential, your understanding of yourself. And I want you to like blossom and do great things. And that comes out of some kind of love. So love for people, love for their potential, love for the possibility. And so I wanted love to be a theme here. Well, how do we do that? You know, it's a little hokey. So we're just outside of Baltimore, Maryland for the first ever Bridging the Gap Train the Trainer. We went from 2 campuses to 9 campuses. Now we're trying to go from 9 to 20. We need a team of people who are aligned with the purpose and share the skills and have the capacity to teach it. We brought in guest speakers who could talk about love, and I was introduced through TNP to Barbara Frederickson, who writes about the science of love.
I am a scientist in an area called affective science. I study emotions, and especially positive emotions. What are the positive states that contribute to the strength of the social fabric? Love is central to the whole development of the human race. I mean, we're mammals. We connect. There aren't mammals that just live separately in isolation and only pop online every once in a while to communicate abstractly. Our connections to others are what make us care about another person. And when we care about another person, we'll do things to protect public health. We'll do things to build better communities. But we don't do that when we let our concern for other people just erode. And so that's where the crisis, I think, that we're in, is that people's level of concern for the wellness of others is at, in my lifetime, an all-time low. There's no question that the human mind is pulled towards the negative. We are hardwired that way because we need to keep track of where the dangers are. We can't forget that we get to choose what we feel and when more than we realize. Our positive feelings need to be contextually appropriate and genuine. I'm not talking about just, yippee, let's go be happy and forget that the world's burning. But positive emotions like this fundamentally change the way the human brain takes in information. And by doing that, it gets us out of this corner where we're kind of trapped in a small view of the world and can lead to a more expansive view. We're going to need that expansive view to make sense of all these intertwined issues and problems and impasses that we face.
When she first said that when you have a positive feeling or you feel happy, literally you can see the big picture, I was thinking, that's amazing. Like, that's my life story. Like, I used to be way angrier, way more narrow in focus, just like, I'm gonna win this. And I don't think I saw all that. And the more I found joy and happiness and gratitude in my life, love, the more I was like, oh wait, I actually see this whole story unfolding.
There are some really cool, very detailed cognitive science studies that show that peripheral vision gets expanded when people are feeling a mild, fleeting positive emotion. And so when that happens, you can connect the dots in a bigger picture. People are more verbally creative when they have a wider field of view.
This one really does blow me away. The idea that when I'm feeling grateful, I'm feeling positive, I'm feeling love and connection, that literally I can see a bigger picture.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't have believed it was literally I'm seeing a bigger picture. I would just say like, oh, now I see the big picture. But you're teaching as you really are.
People look around more. They move their eyes, they move their head. So it's not just a broader span of attention, even though your focus is right here. It's actually people are sampling a bigger world. And also, if you picture how someone walks when they're depressed, they're kind of looking down, head down. And when someone's happy, their head is up. Guess what? You see more when your head is up. It's so multiply determined, and it's happening at all these different levels.
It's amazing. So it's not just I think I'm different. Literally, I'm different. So Barbara made her presentation. It hit the things I wanted her to hit. She talked about this idea of positive resonance and the impact it has on people. But in this moment in America, there's a hyper awareness whenever there's a white leader or speaker. Like, does he or she get it? And so there was a assessing happening. Like, is Barbara aware of structural racism? And Barbara didn't speak about any of that. And so Barbara got focused on as she doesn't get it. And I think it's ungenerous and unforgiving.
People of color have to, most of the time, we feel like we have to be the people to reach out and to be vulnerable first, and that it's not on our white European descent counterparts to do the same action. And I completely understand where that's coming from. I have felt that myself. It's something that like people of color in the United States do live with on a daily basis.
I cannot engage because if I'm triggered by it, I'm going to want to say, I'm going to want to say why I'm triggered by it. I'm going to want to say why this is wrong, because I'm usually not going to say anything unless it's just wrong.
One of our facilitators, Christopher, said, Barbara's talking a lot about when you create moments of connection, of positivity, of love, of happiness, how the value it has for you in your life. And he said, that's the survival strategy Black people have been taught. Right? You get treated badly by a racist, you love them, right? Kind to them, because if you give them back what they gave you, it could cost you your life.
We can all have the common denominator of I want peace, I want love, I want unity, but our own trauma stands in the way of our own peace sometimes.
It's a complex conversation between what Barbara is sharing and systemic racism. Christopher had interesting things to say, the group had interesting things to say, and Barbara had interesting things to say. And in dialogue, we could learn a lot about the complexities of love and race. The tragedy is that because of certain signals not being hit, people end up shutting down. And I guess that's exactly what Bridging the Gap is trying to counter. People use language like, I couldn't even hear you. You actually could. Just take a deep breath and listen, and you could hear. I've definitely had moments looking around the group thinking, we went about this the wrong way. We recruited a really, I think, talented, diverse group of people. But the question in my mind is like, do they really want to bridge to people who may have fundamental disagreements? I do, but I don't know if they do, really. Really at the end of the day.
In a situation as complicated as the Arab-Israeli conflict, there's no learning about what's really going on the ground, until you invite multiple narratives and see what's important to all of these people. I enter the conversation as a person of color, being Latina, and as a Jew, which in the context of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, people consider these like white settler colonialists. So that complicates things, I guess. I've been studying the Arab-Israeli conflict. I lived in Israel. I've been studying that for 6 years, and I still know nothing. So we're getting a coalition of students together to go. I've never gone into Gaza or the West Bank, so this is my first chance to go to the Dome of the Rock, to go to Ramallah, Bethlehem, and it's my first time to really get immersed into Palestinian society. I'm trying to get literature that provides different narratives. I can say, like, this is the hardest one for me to read. There are things where I'm like, okay, like, this resonates, like, I understand this, and things where I'm like, did you really just say that? And I mean, it's the same thing for this too, like Case for Israel. There's things that are like resonant, and there's a ton of stuff that it's like, wow, like I'm really embarrassed to be Jewish because of this book. I think the entire trip could be a failure if we were missing the narrative of you shouldn't go to Israel at all. Like, I want one of those people to come on the trip. This week has been stressful, to say the least. It's our like final push on recruitment, so we're trying to get kind of those last numbers in so we can actually do the trip and make sure it's worthwhile. I spent about half an hour talking yesterday to a first year who was super interested in going and was really excited about the itinerary, but didn't want to go because he was worried about getting canceled. Like, this poor kid is 2 months into college and he's already worrying about this. His family's Israeli. Like, it was kind of heartbreaking, honestly. The Students for Justice in Palestine are tabling in the library. They're calling for the shutdown of the trip entirely, recruiting people to condemn it.
There's like hundreds of Oberlin students signing petitions right now to kill this trip to Israel and to Palestine that Javi's organizing, that we're working on together. Can you imagine? Like, they're posting on Instagram, come to Mud Hall to sign the petition. That's what they're doing on their Saturday?
The way that my mother has described Oberlin students is that students go in and then their sort of like sharp argumentative point becomes really, really, really like sharpened, for lack of a better word. It's almost like a spear. And so by the time you get to be a senior, that spear has sharpened. I think for some of us, maybe that spear is still very sharp.
There are times when there are certain kinds of practices that everyone feels like they're obligated to be engaged in, even though most people don't actually want to be. They feel like there are norms of incivility that they need to abide by in order to make sure that they don't lose the respect of their peers, so they join in.
It's not only the things that I believe in at stake, but like my entire social life is at stake, because once you get canceled at Oberlin, you are done for.
I'd never imagined like one of my best friends to be in that position. Because for me, the language of bridge building is the right language. It's the only right language.
People label me a Zionist.
So what does Zionist mean?
A Zionist? Well, that's a loaded question. To me, Zionism means that Jews have a right to Jewish safety, and that it recognizes Judaism having a root and a connectedness to the land of Israel. And like, it's important for me for Jews to have a place in the land where our history began and where our tradition is so centered. At Oberlin, Zionist is a bad word. And Zionist is what people call you behind your back as an insult. And to them, it's this oppressive power because they say it's a white, colonial, oppressive, fascist, whatever you want to call it. I wish that this was a moment where I could engage.
Yeah.
And I'm attempting to engage, and I've been attempting to engage. And there's a non-engagement policy from Students for Justice in Palestine. There's a non-engagement policy for Jewish Voices for Peace. And all I want to do is be like, tell me more about that.
A non-engagement policy? That is the stupidest thing I've ever heard of.
I just got home from the interest meeting, where we talked about, like, it was just like an interest meeting for the winter term. About 15 people showed up, 14 of them were protesters. It was really disheartening, honestly. Question after question after question that was basically phrasing us as, like, supporting genocide.
It's heartbreaking. Javi has shown me legitimate people sitting at a table advertising a protest against bridge building, because that's what it is. You're choosing to act without listening, and you're choosing to act without asking questions.
I know that we're not going to change their minds about coming, but I really just wish that they would stop humiliating people that did want to come and learn and use this as a tool of learning, because they're rejecting the inherent idea of using this as a tool for learning. And that's really damaging our ability to have impact on this campus. And that sucks, because this is where I've spent the last 4 years.
We came up with this phrase, the heroes are the bridge builders, as like the tagline for Bridging the Gap. I feel like I'm on a hunt for talented people who have this conviction. The deformed narrative is that the courageous ones are the ones doing the calling out, and the soft ones are the ones who compromise. And in that narrative, we've turned on its head. What is courage? So the progressive police of conformity, they're bullies. That's what they are, they're bullies. And to stand up to a bully takes a lot of courage. And so Javi is standing up to bullies. We're talking about how brave Javi is, and she is, and Elizabeth too, and they're brave for different reasons and in different ways, but maybe this is the shadow side. I find them so inspiring, which says how desperate it is. There aren't thousands of them, and I'm not sure they're going to win. It's possible the trip will get canceled, or no one will go. I wouldn't take it as the ultimate defeat. I would take it as vindication in a way of how bad it is. I think about the program like an acupuncturist's needle. They put a needle like behind your ear and the pain in your knee stops. Don't know how, but that's what happens. And so maybe this program is like that. We're going to intervene here. It's going to unleash something, and that will have ripples that we can't totally predict. And maybe as the result of those ripples, we get a much more dramatic change at a much larger scale because we tapped into the right meridian.
I do think that we need to take seriously whether and how love is the answer. If we don't have a bigger picture set of preferences and values, then we're just going to be weather vanes for what's the most attention grabbing. And that angry stuff is the most attention grabbing. It actually takes some self-control to not fall into those rabbit holes, or some priorities, like, I actually value my mental health and my ability to get something done. Tune into the gratitude show instead of the anger show.
We definitely have enough humility to know that we don't know what the end game is on this. We've seen the power it can have on some students. So let's keep building on that.
I don't think that we can do it with the resources that we have. I don't think that there's a way forward given the country we are now, the moral resources we have, the fact that we are, in a sense, in the post-Babel age. We don't have any sense of commonality. The Tower of Babel has been destroyed. Things are going to change, and things are going to happen that we can't even imagine. And some of these things might be terrible, but in history, usually things have gotten better. And there have been crisis times before. Somehow we're going to get there. I can't see it now, but I do expect we'll eventually figure it out. I want to do what I'm best at, which I'm going to read books and analyze this and try to contribute the moral psychology. And you're going to do what you're best at, which is talking to people and applying, integrating ideas from all over and really putting it in the face-to-face encounters. And these guys that are here are going to do what they're best at, which is making great videos of things. And I think a motto for the 2020s, let me just propose it here, I haven't said this before, let's go easier on each other. Let's just start there. Love and forgiveness, I hope we'll get to, but for now, let's just go easier on each other.